Political ideology. Right, political ideology in comparative government is a little bit different than the different political ideologies that you would find in US government. So in US government, our two political ideologies really are conservative and liberal, and then most people are moderate. Political ideology, by definition, is a set of political values held by an individual regarding the basic goal of government and politics. It becomes the set of beliefs about politics and public policy that creates a lens in which you view the role of government. So in the United States political system, if you are a conservative, you believe that the government should take a hands-off role in economic policy by not regulating businesses too much. If you are a liberal in the US, then you would view the government's role in social policy as the government shouldn't be involved in your own personal life and personal decisions. Okay, so that is the lens that is created through your political ideology, which you've acquired through the process of socialization. But it's a little bit different when it comes to world politics or comparative government. So we're going to go through the different ideologies that you would find in comparative government. Okay, the first one we're going to start with is liberalism. Liberalism, it is important to note that this ideology is different from the liberal ideology that you hear of in US government. Liberals on the world stage, most of y'all would be liberals on the world stage, meaning that y'all seek freedom for all people, and that freedom would be including freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and the freedom to associate with who you would like to associate with. But it also has to do with freedom of choice in the marketplace, and that's what makes it a little bit different than liberalism in the US. Liberalism on the world stage really is about more liberalism and choice with economic decisions, like your choice as a consumer, your choice as an entrepreneur, right? And that's what makes it a little bit different, again, than the liberal in the US government realm. Liberalism in world politics also means that there is a belief that citizens have the right to disagree with state decisions, and that the state can't use force or coercion to make you agree with them. Okay. And public opinion generally has an impact on what politicians want to do and what politicians say in a liberal government, meaning that the politicians actually are going to respond to the people's needs. So you will see liberal democracies in the US, a liberal democracy in Great Britain. Now compare that to illiberal or illiberal. An illiberal democracy, remember, they don't really give you a lot of choices. They don't really give you freedom of speech. They just pretend like you have choices and freedom of speech. So that's how, again, it is different than the liberal Democrat you would find in the US. Okay. The next ideology is communism. Now, they believe that liberal democracies put a lot of value on the ideal of equal opportunity, and that liberal democracies talk about equal opportunity and equality, but in actuality, they don't have equality of opportunity, and there is a great deal of inequality within the economy. So communism looks at a liberal democracy and says that you really are being fake by the fact that you talk about citizens have these rights and these freedoms, but your system is set up in a way that workers are exploited and consumers are exploited by big business. So communists really reject the idea that personal freedom is going to equal prosperity for the majority. So think Mao. Mao being communist. Think Stalin. Stalin being a communist. They took away farmers' freedoms to farm their own land. They collected, through the collectivization process, the farmers' land and didn't give them the choice anymore to the economic freedom to work on their own property. Okay. Communists also believe that all of this freedom and choice will inevitably result in a competition for the scarcest of all resources, which will eventually lead in liberal democracies to one elite group controlling the resources of the country. So that idea of the wealthy are only going to get richer and the poor are only going to get poorer. So the way that communism seeks to rectify that situation is that communists believe that the best way to make everything more equal is to eliminate this competition of resources, to eliminate the freedom of personal choice, especially of the consumer and the business operator. So the way you eliminate that is you get rid of private property, you redistribute the property of the wealthy, you give everybody the same amount. Now, in order for that to work, you have to suppress individual liberties, because it's no longer about the individual or individualism. It's about the collective common good. So that was the idea that drove those collectivization of farms, is that you collected the land and you gave it to everybody, so everybody would be able to produce and have a little bit. Next one is socialism. We're going to call this communist light, because unlike communism, there is not as much government control. With socialism, there's more value placed on freedom. There is some private ownership. There are some free market principles, but you are going to have instances where the government will come in and nationalize or take over an industry, and the government will heavily regulate businesses, like Mexico did with Pemex. Pemex being an energy petroleum company in Mexico. With socialism, the state or the government does have a strong role in controlling the economy and making sure that public benefits are distributed to everyone. Again, that whole idea of equality and common good. So an example of that would be collective consensus under the UK, or collective consensus, which they collected the profits of certain industries and they collected higher taxes, and then they established welfare programs to make sure that everybody in the UK was taken care of and had basic needs met. All right, and that example of a welfare state or a collective consensus program was the National Health Service. Before we go over fascism, to kind of clarify the major difference between socialist and communist, again, is that socialists allow for more freedom. Now, the difference between socialists and liberals, in contrast to liberals, socialists believe that the state has more of a role to play in regulating the economy. I would compare socialism in the United States to very liberal Democrats. All right, fascism. Fascism is not communism. The reason why fascism and communism are also placed together a lot of times or misconstrued as the same thing is because both of them do not allow for individual freedom. Okay, so fascism is the idea that you don't have your individual freedom. You are a part of a country, you are part of a nation, you are part of a state. And that patriotism is so intense and should be valued over any other allegiance. So I want you to think Nazi Germany and Hitler, right? That is ultimate fascism. But the one thing is that fascists reject the idea of equality, whereas that is the whole basis of communism, is equality of income, equality of product, equality of choice, but not with fascism. All right, religion. Religion I'm putting in here because you do have religion playing a major role in ideologies in certain countries like Iran, in theocracies. But what you will find in many advanced, very liberal democracies like the US, there is a clear separation. Well, that was a new noise. There's a clear separation of church and state. So theocracies like Iran, that's where religion is going to play a huge role in political ideology. And Iran, it based its entire political system on Islam. And then you'll see places like Nigeria, religion plays a mixed role. So you'll have like some religious law or Sharia in the northern part of Nigeria, but not really so much in the southern part of Nigeria. Now, you do have religion playing a role in Mexico, like the Catholic Church, but there still is that idea of separation of church and state. All right, here's a couple of charts to hopefully give you a visual of ideology, and it mixes a little bit of the global political ideology with the United States ideology. All right, so this first chart, we have low belief in the equality of individuals. Okay, so if you do not believe that individuals should really have the government protect equality, it's really about who can be the strongest, kind of like survival of the fittest. You're going to be in the lower quadrants. And then on the top quadrants, you have the high belief in the equality of the individual. Okay, so let's start with the low belief in the equality of the individual. Libertarians, like Gary Johnson, U.S. Republicans are much closer to the middle ground. And then fascist. Okay, so they all believe in low equality or the government protection of the equality of people. If you go up here, the high belief in the equality of individuals, you have anarchy. Again, it's a survival of the fittest, but anarchy also is the idea that the government isn't really necessary because we can kind of govern ourselves. All right, so the equality of individual is high there. In communism, the equality of the individual is high as well. And then Democrats, again, are covering the border. And then on this, from low belief in state power or authority of the government to high belief in state power or authority of the government. So anarchists and libertarians really do want to see a situation where the government isn't really doing much and that the government's role is very minimal, period. U.S. Republicans believe that U.S. Republicans believe that the government shouldn't be involved in economic decisions, and their role is low in that regard. So on the other side of the spectrum, you have high belief in state power, where you'd find high belief or authority in state power. You would find communist, because again, in order to control the economy, the government has to be very authoritarian or strong. And then fascist, like Hitler, again, he had a lot of power and authority. Here's another chart. Okay, so we have kind of the same idea, just a little flipped. All right, so libertarian or anarchism, little government involvement. Authoritarian, fascist, lots of government involvement. Left would be collectivism or communism. Right would be neoliberalism or libertarianism, so very free. If you are in the top portion, then you believe that the government should have a lot of control. You are in the bottom portion, you believe that the government should not have a lot of control. If you are over here, you believe that in communism, so like Stalin had a lot of control and was communist. Margaret Thatcher had a